told me not to smoke drugs, but I wouldn't listen. Never thought I'd get caught and wind up in prison. Chalk it up to youth, but young age I ain't dissing. I guess I just had to get it out of my system. Out of my system. Out of my system. Oh Lord, I never ain't missing. Glad I went and got it all out of my system.
Welcome to Uncarcerated. I'm Lee. I'm your guide through this podcast. Each episode, we're going to focus on a journey into freedom from individuals that have been in various institutions. So we're going to start off with jails and prisons, mental health facilities, but eventually, as this show sort of grows and gets bigger, we'll sort of touch on anybody who's finding new freedom from any type of incarceration. And that may look like a long illness. It may look like a divorce or a trauma or a death. Anytime that you've had a huge shift in your life where you feel like you've had to check out of society, and then what re-entering sort of looks like. So, but again, our main focus is going to be the criminal justice system. What are some of the fatal flaws in the legal system itself? The institutions themselves, what can they do better? What are they doing well? Where are some gaps? But the main broad focus of this show will be the journey as people are released into the wild. And eventually I will tell my own story and what sort of brought me here. But I want to just jump right in and make this mainly about the narratives that we're going to cover, because I think this is a voiceless population. We've got millions and millions of people that are incarcerated or in mental health facilities or jails or in and out of that revolving door. And obviously there is a lack of support. There's a gap somewhere, and no one can say anything about it because your legislators are not out there fighting for you, because most of incarcerated individuals can't vote. Some states have fixed that, but there's a lot of people that don't vote. It's not a voting block. You can't go out and fight for people because, you know, in the minds of the American people, the average American, you think incarcerated and you think, it's a murderer or a raper. And that's just not what that population is. Maybe in the 70s or early 80s, that's what we confined criminals to, people of color and violent people. That's basically what the system was. But now the system is expanded to where it swallows up anybody who makes a mistake or has a mental health problem or has a bad reaction to medication or addiction problems. It's swallowed up all sorts of people. So everybody's been touched by this. And I think it's time we start pivoting and turning what the American people think of when they think about somebody who's been plucked out of society, so that we can start waging more support. So I want to be able to tell these stories for people. So my first guest, I am lucky enough to have an extremely smart guy, a guy that I've been in programs with. I did a program called Toastmasters with this guy, and I'm really lucky to have him on as my first guest. Peter, say hello to literally tens of people that are listening right now. Peter, can you tell us sort of where you're at right now? Let's just start with, what is your day-to-day operation looking like? Where are you living? How long have you been free? How long have you been home for? Where are you at right now?
I am currently living in a work release facility, and I'm working at a Subaru car manufacturer, and I was blessed to get that job. I got out of prison February 5th and had no clue that I was getting out on that date, and was told to report to work release 2 days later for them to tell me that I didn't need to come back for another 3 weeks. And so I was literally left homeless for the most part and completely shocked to be back in society. So it's been a bit of an interesting journey.
Well, I mean, right off the bat, you can see where the system has giant cracks in it, where and we'll get to know you here, but if you're not a guy who's got a good head on your shoulders, or, you know, God forbid, you're fucking traumatized from what you just went through, you could very easily go back to what people are comfortable with and the survival skills that most of us have, because they didn't teach you how to deal with emotional trauma and breakups and death and addiction and mental health. They didn't teach you that kind of stuff in school. So most of our survival skills are I feel bad feelings, I will drink it away. I will spend it away. I'll make as much money as possible. I'll get in bad relationships. All of us have these shitty survival skills. So here you are left almost homeless, no therapy, no way to deal with any of these kinds of things, and they're like, "Good luck, see you in 3 weeks."
Yeah, and no knowledge that it was coming. I thought I still had 4 more months to do, and was told one day out of the blue to pack my stuff. You're leaving today. And so I thought work release was there to get me, only to find out they were dropping me off in Indianapolis. And my head was spinning for a good week straight. I had no clue what happened.
What describe real quick what that feeling is like? I don't think anyone can really understand unless you've lived it or been there, but that feeling of pack your shit, it's time to go. That it's like no other feeling you could ever experience. Can you just sort of like take us through what, physically and mentally and emotionally, like what was that like when somebody says, "Hey, you're leaving prison right now"?
My instant reaction was to fight it and say, "No, I'm not." I was not. I wasn't ready for it. I hadn't mentally prepared for it. I thought I had 2 more months to get my head right. So at first and then I just went into pretty much shock and was on autopilot. And the next thing I knew, I'm standing in my mom's living room with my brother and had no clue how I even got there. It was shell shocked is the best way that I can explain it. Physically, my stomach was upset. My hands were sweaty. It was a lot to take in.
I can imagine, man. I can imagine. I've been through similar situations. So, I mean, I was told to pack my stuff and go, and was not ready for it to go to a work release facility. And then I was plucked out of the work release facility and sent back to prison because my ankle monitor broke. So I've been in those situations before where it's just complete helplessness. There's nothing you can do. There's no phone calls you can make. There's no support. It's really this feeling of being completely alone in the wild.
Absolutely. And my parents, I hadn't been able to see them for over a year at this point because of COVID. They weren't allowed to come visit at the prison. And they had just left 4 days prior to go spend 2 weeks or 2 months in Arizona. And so it's freezing outside. Nobody's at my mom's house. And the guy said, "Well, that's not my problem. My problem is to drop you off at this address." So I had to go to my neighbor's house, not knowing how COVID even works these days and if they would even open the door to me. And she was nice enough to let me use her phone. And I called my mom and she said, "Where are you at? What are you doing?" I said, "I'm at your house." And she didn't believe me. She said, "How did that happen?" I said, "Well, Mom, obviously I escaped." She did not find the humor in that. But so I had to wait there for my sister to come let me in. And I thought I had 72 hours to report to work release. So the next day, I spent the night with my brother. The next day, my sister took me to another town, actually, where one that you know well in Terre Haute, to spend the night with my daughter. And it was great. I got to spend the night with her. She had no clue I was out. And she's 15 years old. Her mom used to be my tattoo artist, and she did her first tattoo ever on my leg. So I've got a permanent piece of that with me. And then I thought I had to be in Lafayette Monday for work release, so I caught $100 Uber. Thank God for good friends that got me down this way. Stayed the night in a motel, went to work release the next day, and they said, "No, you're just coming in to set your intake appointment 14 days later." And nobody prepared me for that. Nobody explained anything to me. The prison said, "Oh, we'll report there on Monday because they'll be closed by the time you get up there Friday." And then they tell me come back in 14 days, and it ended up getting extended another week because of COVID. And if it wasn't for a handful of really good people in my life, I would have been in a pickle. And one thing that it actually did cause was when I got back in the car, I looked through my phone and I found somebody who I knew I could count on. And he said, "Yeah, absolutely. Come on through. You're welcome here." But what I didn't realize was his place was no longer a place that I should be. And so here I am right back around people that I don't need to see. And so I made the choice to leave there and basically couch hop for a while until a friend of mine put me up in a motel. And then another good friend took me in for the last 10 days. But if I was somebody that had nobody, I don't know what I would have done.
Peter, I want to come back to that idea and expand on that just a little bit more. The lack of community, the lack of communication, the lack of support, no money, and the idea that an institution that is not very well run, that is not empathetic, that just sees you as a number, is in charge of what can happen in your life. And it's sort of like, for those of you out there listening who haven't been incarcerated or don't know anybody that's been in these institutions, imagine that a slightly shittier DMV is in charge of huge life decisions for you. That's sort of what this process is like. It's just this giant behemoth. There's nobody to call. I want to come back to that, but Peter, can you sort of set the scene and let us know how long you were gone and what got you there?
This particular prison sentence, I was gone for just under 3 years, and the same thing got me there that got me into federal prison before that, and that was chasing easy money, selling narcotics.
All right, so you're a young father, probably a single dad at this point. You guys have broken up, and you're looking for security and support, and the quickest way to do it is to just sell some drugs. So you make those decisions, and then when you get caught and you get caught up in the legal system, what did that process look like? What were you able to do to say, this is the type of person I am, this is the jobs I've had, this is the type of father I am, here are the things I've done well, and here is some things that I can own up to that I have done poorly. That idea that I can simultaneously, because isn't that the human experience? All of us, to one degree to another, have things that we do really well, and we have some things that we fuck up on. I mean, that's just the human experience. A lot of us just don't get caught for the screw-ups, or maybe they're not as pronounced or as big as, federal drug charges, okay? But to one extent or the other, we all have this good and bad false default position. Now you're caught up in this system. How are you able to sell yourself to the legal system, to the judge? Did you have an attorney? Did you have a public defender? How did that end up working out for you? Were you able to advocate for yourself?
Horribly. You trust in your attorney. I had a paid attorney, and you trust in that. And sometimes, I don't have any hard evidence that this is what they do, but we see it all the time. They railroad certain clients to get deals for other clients. On this particular case, I had wired buys made. I had no video, only audio, and the CI in question ended up dying 3 days after they served the warrant on me. And my attorney convinced me that we had no chance at trial. So I signed a plea agreement, hired another attorney to do a post-conviction relief, and she was appalled that I took a plea that I never should have done that. So we filed an appeal. But as far as having the negatives and the positives in life, I was college educated. I've held 2 professional licenses, one in real estate, one in life and health insurance, had great jobs, but I always did the extra on the side. But once you're in the legal system, even having those positives, for the most part, makes you look worse. So there was really no way to advocate for yourself. When my attorney got up to do the mitigating circumstances and things, the only thing he said for me is he's intelligent, he speaks 2 languages, and he lost his father at an early age. And I literally gasped in court. I could not believe that was his final argument on my behalf when I'm facing 7 years in prison. And it cost me $3,500 for that professional opinion. And so it was, but I got myself there. So it's, what the legal system is, and if you don't want to get railroaded by it, the best choice is to stay out of it. But I definitely made some mistakes that put me right in the middle of it.
For sure. I mean, obviously, the pat answer from the people that are resistant to helping fund systems to help people is, well, don't do the crime if you can't do the time. And obviously, there's some truth to some of that. But, some people obviously don't have the skill set. They were born into poverty. They didn't make it through college. And, I think we all end up with, like I said before, shitty survival skills. So I think you're right, though, on that note, that if you do come into the system and the judge looks at you and says, well, shit, you didn't have an excuse. You were just trying to make extra money, or you were just robbing someone to feed your shitty habit, but you went to college, or you had a child. I know a lot of people try to use their children as a defense, and the judge can look at you and just say, you had every reason to not do these things.
Absolutely.
So once you're in the system, what did that look like? Take us through the whole journey of looking at 7 years. You go from county jail, you've probably been there for a while, and you get to the reception center, and then you make it to your camp. Tell us, what that journey looked like, what the fears were, what the emotional response to that was, and obviously give us any kind of insight as to how daunting a place like a reception center is.
The reception center is definitely an experience. There's range upon range upon range. You're in your cell 23 hours a day. The guy in the cell with you could be facing 100 years for murder, or be sentenced to 100 years for murder. So you've got literally everybody mixed in with you.
Yeah,
but
for those people who don't know how this works, sorry to interrupt you, Pete, but for those people who maybe don't understand how this works, this is all before you're classified. So coming into the system and coming out of the system are actually two of the most dangerous positions to be in, because you're right, everybody's mixed together. There's no rhyme or reason to it whatsoever.
Right. When I got to the reception center, it's a blessing to leave county jail. When they tell you that DOC is there to get you, you're thrilled. But when we get down to the reception center, my range was on permanent lockdown, no movie night, no nothing, because a guard had gotten assaulted quite badly for being disrespectful to somebody, and the person had nothing to lose. And so that's when you realize that you're not in Kansas anymore. And it's definitely a strange place. And you're there. I was there for 30 days from December 1st to December 31st. So I spent my Christmas in there, and it's just you come out of your cell only to go to chow. That's it. And a movie once on Saturday. So you basically start your journey off by being treated like you are the most high-level criminal that they have in the system. And that's for people that are doing 2 years, 3 years, or 50. They all get treated the same because they don't know who they've got there.
Yeah, and there's no reading materials, there's no television, there's nothing to distract you, and you've now been plucked out of county jail, where you've probably been given a sense of relief. For most people, even if you do have some time to do, once that waiting period is over, from the not knowing, from being arrested to the point that you're sentenced, that's one of the worst times, because you just have no idea. There's no way to plan. There's no way to know if you're going to be returned to society soon, later, right now, who knows. Once you get sentenced, it's sort of like you take a breath of fresh air, and then all of a sudden you're thrown into a cage, and you're alone for 24 hours a day with your own thoughts.
With your own thoughts. And scratched onto the wall above my bars on the front of my cell at the reception center, it said, "We're all here because we're not all there." And that really stuck with me.
Wow. All I saw was swastikas. So, I mean, I didn't have the same poignant experience that you did. Okay, so you leave the reception center, and where did you end up? Did you try to choose a place? Because so the difference between, and again, for those of you listening to Uncarcerated for the first time, we're going to talk to people leaving various institutions from all over the country, jails, prisons, mental health facilities. But early on, our focus will be Indiana and Florida, because those are the two groups of people that I'm pulling from right now. But eventually we'll talk to people all over the country. But so in Florida, when you go to the reception center, you don't get a say-so in where you go at all. In fact, they send you as far away from your family as possible for what they say is security purposes. But really, it just overly punishes people, and it overly punishes their family, because their family usually came from there's poor areas. They don't have the ability to travel and see you. It costs them now a lot of extra money to do visits, to put money on your account for phone calls. The whole thing is a racket. In Indiana, you actually have the ability to stay a little bit closer to home. So as you're going through classification, Peter, what what did that look like? Did you try to pick somewhere that was closer to home or what?
I'm from Indianapolis, and I caught my case about an hour north of Indy, and so I was told on your parole address, write down an address of an area that you want to be in a prison in that area. So I wrote down my mom's address in Indianapolis, trying to go to IYC, which is just on the outskirts of Indy. I figured a lot of people from the neighborhood I grew up in would be there. It'd kind of be a family reunion. Not family, but friend reunion. And I got my letter back saying that that's where they were going to send me. Then when they called me out to pack up, I said, where am I going? And they said, Branchville. Well, I had never heard of Branchville. It turns out that Branchville was 3 hours south on the very southern tip of the state of Indiana. And I mean, it was 3 hours from my family, 4 hours from my fiance. It was, like you said about Florida, it was about as far away that they could put me, and in a place that was quite interesting, it turns out.
So tell us what your experience with Branchville was like when you get there and you see that this place looks like, a community college, but with a cage around it. What were your feelings when you got off the bus?
The first thing I thought was, it's nice to see sunshine,
Yeah.
and it'll be nice to be able to go outside every day. But on the walk of shame with your bright oranges on, walking to the reception center, all the inmates, every last one of them that passed me said, oh, you fucked up coming here. Oh, you messed up picking this prison.
Yeah,
I thought, what the hell? I didn't
Yeah.
pick this prison.
Yeah, I had the exact same experience.
And so
I'm sitting
that
there,
was...
I'm sitting there, I'm super excited. I'm like, man, I see this list of classes you can take, and I'm thinking, you know what? I'm just going to treat this couple of years like it's like a shitty community college, right? And every orderly, every person that works there is walking by going, you fucked up. You fucked up.
Yep. It was very daunting. At a shitty community college, you got the shitty part right.
So the first dorm you go to, explain what happens in that dorm while you wait and what it's like before you're assigned to the place that you're going to live potentially for the next few years.
A&O, when I was there, was in A dorm, and that was awful. They had the worst sergeant in the entire camp there. He wrote everybody up for everything, and they tell you, oh, this is a program camp, you can get time cuts, but all I seen them do was write people up for the pettiest of things and take their programs from them. And that was my first introduction to this place, was you're not going to leave earlier than your max out date because this place is not going to let you. So they definitely put their worst foot forward and had me on eggshells.
So let's dive into that for a second. For the listeners, this Branchville place is supposed to be set up as a model prison. And I think, on face value, it's actually a pretty good idea. Now, a lot of prisons in Indiana and across the country is they use the philosophy of warehousing. You're just there to do your time. Sit back, don't bother the guards. A lot of them won't bother you. Every once in a while you get a shitball who hates his life and he comes in and he or she takes it out on the dorm. But for the most part, stay out of each other's way. But there's no extra. There's no college education. There's no plays. There's no Toastmasters. There's no self-betterment. There's none of those. Now, you get some volunteers from the Christian community to come in, so you get a lot of faith-based stuff. But obviously, with the recidivism rate, just finding God is not preventing people from coming back to prison. The statistics show that the holistic approach to reforming people, some GED, some form of education, some form of spirituality, some form of addiction and mental health treatment, those things in combination with each other can greatly increase your chances of not coming back. But most places don't have that. Most places you can go to church on a Sunday. Now, Branchville actually had a pretty wide range of things that you could be involved in. But here's the problem. The people who were funding these programs usually were contracted from outside groups, some healthcare organization or some volunteer groups, and they were subjected to these people who work there that don't give two shits about these programs. In fact, they've probably been working in the prison system for 15 or 20 years. They're completely jaded. They don't understand nuance at all. So they see people coming in and out of the system second, third, fourth time, and they just go, yeah, these programs aren't helping anybody, and I don't give a shit if you go home or not. In fact, the longer you stay here, the more chances I have a job. So you get people who intentionally try to, oh, your bed's not made at 11 a.m. or your boots were on the outside of your bunk and not the inside of your bunk. Those little sort of militaristic tricks that they use, and obviously somebody playing devil's advocate would just say, if you can't do the little things right, you can't do the big things right, and that's why these rules are in place. I understand all that. But when you're talking about playing with months and months and years of somebody's life over something that could be dealt with in a different way. There's ways to give people community service while you're in prison. There's ways to sit people out of certain things without affecting these programs that can give you a time cut or that can forget the time cut.
Right.
These programs could actually help people. And so you get the people who are the guards, the corrections officers that are involved there almost are your roadblock to going home. And I've seen people you lose years and years of their lives. And of course, you go back to, well, the guy, he broke a rule, so what are you going to do? Obviously, he broke the rules on the outside. He's breaking the rules in here. He doesn't deserve the program. But that argument to me speaks to your lack of compassion and understanding and empathy. And what are we doing? Are we not human beings anymore? I mean, so talk about that a little bit, Peter. Like having to run that gauntlet between the time you're in a A&O dorm, which is an idle dorm, there's no programs, to the time you go into your program, you're running this gauntlet of like, at any point, I could get in serious shit here and lose everything. And then I'm here for 6-7 years instead of 2 or 3 years.
It can happen at the drop of a hat. Somebody has a bad phone call and you bump into them when they get off the phone and you're fighting and they're taking 6 months from you or more. Branchville like to put outside cases on people. I had more than one staff member, not just COs, but even a counselor say, our job is not to make sure you go home as early as possible. Our job is to make sure you stay alive. And to me, that was just ridiculous. And it gave you a very isolated feeling. And that isolated feeling does nothing but feed the gangs. And you get these people that feel all alone, they're going to click up. And there's two things that are always going to be in prison, and that's gangs and drugs. And so you've got these people that are there supposedly doing their job, but they get paid by the hour. They don't care one way or the other what happens to you. And so it's an easy place to lose yourself. And I'd say that was the biggest problem there. That no access to your counselors. Your counselors should be there doing the most to get you home. And they were by far the laziest human beings I'd ever met. It was, and you touched on the programs that were there, and I seen a lot of people active in a lot of programs that were doing really well and had a year or 2 years clean, but when COVID came in, it completely shut the programs down. Or staff, internal affairs would run off some of the most good-hearted volunteers that used to come do programs there over something petty like writing an inmate on his messaging account. And when those programs stopped, I seen so many people just go to shit and completely fall apart. And it was a fiasco. It was a complete fiasco is the best word to describe it.
I think one of the biggest problems with prison is if you go into this system and you don't know who you are, or you've had a huge trauma and you're trying to figure out who you are, or you're young and you've never known who you were, this place can mold you into something worse. And the gangs take advantage of that. You get guys who are, and there's very few, I would say, and I don't have stats to back this up. I'm just going to make shit up off the top of my head because it's my show and I do what I want. But I would say that 75% of the people there are first or second time offenders. It's usually drug or addiction or mental health related or some result of abject poverty that put them there. They don't deserve to be in this system. They deserve to be somewhere, maybe some sort of an institution, maybe some sort of place that provides structure and self-help programs, but they don't deserve to be there. But there is 25% of the guys that love it there. They have been drug dealers their whole lives or drug addicts their whole lives. They're not looking to change. They're looking to grab people to help support this system that they thrive in. And those gang leaders are really, especially the racial ones, those are the ones where they just take a kid who's malleable, doesn't know much about society, doesn't know much about life. He's got a really small cultural perspective, and they're able to hit on those things and say, see that guy over there? He's your enemy. See that guard right there? They're your enemy. And they're able to sort of attract those people and then use them for whatever purposes they want. And that kind of stuff goes on unadulterated. There's nobody in there policing anything that goes on in there. There's nobody there. They say, well, we're here to keep you alive. That's about it. That's about it. Nobody's there to help. Yeah. Nobody's there when they see somebody, and they can see it. They see what's happening. They know that certain gangs sit at certain tables every single day and are attracting people into their groups, and they don't do anything about it. It's almost like they're watching it happen because they think it's funny.
I mean, I've had monotonous jobs, and you look at weird things for entertainment, and in prison you always hear people say, oh, I'm bitten off that guy, because you'll have somebody in there that's, say, crazy, and they're always seem like they have Tourette's, and they're freaking out and they're doing this, and everybody else will sit back and use it as entertainment. And so it's it's a very interesting place, to say the least.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you run the gauntlet, did you do a program while you're at Branchville?
I was lucky. Right after I got there, they put a note up in the day room saying they were looking for literacy tutors. And so I signed up for that. I got out of the dorm every day to go down to the education department and help. Basically, literacy is 6th, 7th, and 8th grade level of education. And I got a lot of reward out of that. A lot of people, I even had people who have done a massive amount of time stop me on the walk and tell me, I really appreciate you taking the time to explain that a way I could get it. I wouldn't have got through that if it wasn't for you. And that really helped me get into a positive mindset early in my prison bit. I had mentioned previously I had done federal time, and my whole motivation on that was to find better drug connections. And this time when I went, I decided I'm getting up there in age, and if I catch another case, they're really going to fry me. So I went there with a different mindset, and I tried to stay focused on positive things, and that being able to be that tutor right off the bat helped me a lot. I did that, and then eventually was admitted into the Plus program. And that program was what you make it. There's a lot of people in there just for the time cut that go to the class and sit there and don't say anything and don't really get involved. Then there's other people that take an active role in it and really try to get something out of it. And I can say there was some classes where I wanted to chew my leg off for entertainment, but there was a lot of classes that really did a lot of good and helped me understand some things that my brain was doing wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely good information out there, and I think a lot of it is who's facilitating it and who's passing that information along to you. I think one of the problems in these programs is that you get older facilitators who are bitter and jaded, underpaid, overworked, and they're tired of fighting the corrections officers on material that they should bring in and time that they get with the inmates or students, and they've just sort of given up. And then you get younger people who are fresh out of college and they've got a behavioral science degree or a sociology degree, but they don't have any life experience. They don't have a lot of experience with people who have come from the situations that get people into these things. So they're not able to articulate the material in a way that engages anybody. So there really is a need for people to go into these systems and facilitate this information, wouldn't you say?
I absolutely agree with that. and I believe you had already left, and COVID had shut down the Plus program, and the volunteers were no longer allowed in. So we got them to allow us to facilitate the classes in house, and those were more productive. Not to take anything away, some of the facilitators that came in, Bill Mitchell, for instance, was an excellent, excellent man. He had never been through any of the things, but he genuinely cared, and that came across, and everybody loved him. But when the inmates started facilitating it, it kind of took the I don't want to look like I'm not cool, so I'm going to sit here and not say anything, because you've got guys that are sitting here in the same situation you are, sparking the conversations and giving their own personal accounts. And that helped a lot. It had people more interested in the classes, and people were just appreciative that you were willing to do it to help them get their time cut, even with COVID causing so many problems.
Yeah, I had that experience. I was there during COVID and during the shutdown. Very early on, I was in the drug program that they had there. I was not in the Plus program. And the drug program had some good counselors. I mean, I think Miss Miller, for all the flack that she took for making people do their entire 1 year, she had a lot of great information. And if you listened to her, she delivered in a way that was humorous and helpful. And she came with a lot of anecdotes. She brought in guests that were really interesting. I thought Miss Lane did an excellent job. There were people who were definitely there because they cared to be there. They could have been doing something else. They weren't just like jammed into this shitty job. They actually wanted to be there. But once COVID happened and they weren't allowed to come in anymore, everybody was like, you had, out of 300 guys, you probably only had 100 guys who really gave a shit about the information in the first place. The other 200 really were just trying to get a time cut. Well, now you can cut that in half. Now you got about 30 or 40 guys. The other guys had just given up. Like, you're not even going to come in and work with me. No one's telling me anything. No one's telling me if the program's frozen, if my time cut is frozen. Am I going to be here for years while I wait for this program to start back up again? Am I going to die from this disease that no one's explained anything? So you had a lot of fear. And obviously, like we talked about early in the show, when you are faced with fear and trauma as you're going through this sort of growth experience, a lot of people just revert to their shittiest behavior. And I don't really blame people for that. It's not their fault. You're trying to learn better survival skills. You're trying to learn, hey, when I'm faced with trauma, I don't turn to a shitty relationship. I turn away from it. I pick meditation and yoga and journaling and vitamins instead of drugs and alcohol. When you're in a situation like that, and you're very early on in learning these survival skills, it's so much easier. Throw in peer pressure with that. You know, your bunkie could be a gang member, and he's not trying to hear all that self-help shit. And so now you're having to survive this situation where you don't want to be called a snitch. You don't want to be called anything else. And so at best, you're not going to go to anything. At worst, maybe you're start to use again or gangbang or do whatever, you know, your old survival skills tell you to do. So I stepped up and developed a schedule, had to handwrite it out and, you know, get a guard to make copies of it. And I held classes, me and 2 or 3 other guys held classes in the day room to just sort of keep people involved. And I got to tell you, it was a wonderful experience that people felt like they still had something to do in those days of COVID. I had to meet with gang members and have them talk to their groups about keeping people out of the day room. There was guys freaking out and talking about burning the whole thing down. Somebody set a fire in the bathroom at one point. You know, you had a lot of people that were in the middle of a pandemic. They don't ever know if they're going to go home. And so they just stopped giving a shit. And so I went to a couple of the gang members and the leaders, and I said, listen, no cancer patient ever gets through cancer because they burnt the whole thing down. You never hear an angry cancer survivor. The people who survive cancer are the ones that took the most positive outlook in the darkest time of their life. And that's exactly what we have to do right here. The easy thing would be to give in and say, fuck all this. But the thing we have to do is we got to try to be as positive and pass that on to as many people as possible to get through this together. And fortunately, it did kind of stem the tide for a couple of weeks, but after 2, 3, 4 weeks of this, with being given no answers, I got to tell you, it was like being in Lord of the Flies.
It was definitely an experience. Right after you left, D Dorm actually was set on fire. And we got a lot of new people in that leveled down, and COVID hit on the second wave, and it was so bad that they cleared out one half of a dorm and loaded all the other dorms, 288 people in each one to capacity. And it was, I actually was on the phone with my sister, and I said, well, it's official, sis. And she said, what? I said, the animals have taken control of the zoo.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
the guards would come back and they would do count, and they would never come back to the bunk area again. So we literally had, people were doing whatever they wanted and knew the guards weren't going to come back there and say a word to them. It was a very, very interesting place to be there for a few months.
Yeah, in the middle of COVID, and then the George Floyd protests and riots started, and it looked like the world was ending. And you're in prison, and there's nobody there to help because the guards didn't want to catch COVID, so they just stayed in their little area the whole time. So you really were left to your own devices with not some of the best people on the planet. It was pretty scary, to be honest. All right, so
yeah,
so
absolutely.
You get done, and they tell you to pack your shit. We kind of talked a little bit about just sort of being left on your own for a few weeks. If you were a guy who didn't have the intent, the heart to make your life better, what would that 3 weeks have looked like?
Copped a big bag of dope, went out and made some money, and never turned myself into work release, because I know that if I go to work release and cut my bracelet off and run, I'm getting hit with an escape charge. But if I never report to work release, it's just a violation. So that was a big, obvious option for me right as soon the next day, 2 days after I got out. I had that option to go right back to the old me, right back to my old life. At least that way I would know that I had money in my pocket, and I would know where I was staying and what I was doing. So it was, I saw it as the universe putting a big test in front of me. And it was not easy. It was definitely not easy.
So you get to the work release center, and what was looking for an employment like? What was that experience like?
I am in Lafayette, Indiana, and anyone that tells you, felon or non-felon, that they cannot find a job in Lafayette is not looking for one. It was incredibly easy to get a top-level job here working for a top-level company. The day I got my ID, I was hired that day over a phone interview. And then the problem with not having transportation comes into play. And to me, it seems like society is starting to wake up a little more to the problem of the incarceration system and about people coming home and needing support. I pay $5 for a ride there and $5 for a ride back from a pastor of a church, and he has multiple cars that do the runs, and he promised me, you will never be late, you will never miss a day. It's been an incredible experience. The support that I have found out here, I can't speak for everywhere, but up here, actually finding a job and finding transportation was quite easy.
I want to touch on that for a second because in my personal experience, I think it would be reckless for me not to acknowledge the fact that if I wasn't a decent-looking, articulate white guy, my support and my ability to get employment and find systems that supported me as I made this transition, I don't think it would have been nearly as easy. So I just want you to speak to that for a second, Pete. Have you been able to like take a step back and just go, like if I look different or if I had a different background, these things may not be in front of me, and maybe the system isn't set up for everybody to succeed.
If I had $1 for every time one of my other inmates at work release told me that it was because I had the complexion for the connection, I wouldn't need to work. So, I mean, obviously, in America, that is something that you deal with, and a lot of the people here are from Chicago, and they've got an instant bad rap down here just because they're not from here, and it is something you run into everywhere. The pastor that I actually ride with is a black pastor who runs a few different churches here, and so someone like him, there's no color involved. He doesn't see color, and we've had a lot of good conversations about it, but it's just it's a crooked system, and America has never been fair to every race, and I don't know that it ever will be.
Yeah, I definitely like to take time to acknowledge that, because I don't when I tell my story and I explain the successes I've had over the last year or so in being able to find a house and employment, and my daughter recently passed away, and I've faced some real low points, and I think that when I tell my story and it sounds like, wow, you're triumphant, you can make it through any of these things, I think it's important that I acknowledge that there are certain people that are not afforded these same luxuries of support systems. And it can be based on race, or it could just be based on the way you look, or your background, or the mistakes you've made. There's all sorts of discrimination that people face when they come home, and it's not the clean slate that everybody makes it out to be.
It's absolutely stacked against you. There's no other way to look at it. The odds are stacked against you. I watched 5 people that I hang out with on the daily go back to jail in the last 24 hours, and it's a revolving door. There's people that disappear every day out of this work release, and there's new people that show up every day. And most of the new people that show up have an ankle bracelet on already and failed a drug test on house arrest, or did something they weren't supposed to, and they bring them back in here. And I was there for 2 weeks before I even could start working, and that whole time they're charging me $17 a day plus meals. And so it stacks up against you. If you want to have passes on your days off, you've got to make sure your fees are paid, and you're still trying to save money to get a place to live. And it's not designed to help you.
As we wrap up here with you, Peter, and it looks like you've got a foundation to keep this thing going, what would you say 1 or 2 things that you personally face that are daunting, or that you see as a challenge? What are 1 or 2 things that you go, you know what, this is a place where I could trip up? And then what are 1 or 2 things you see that are sort of larger ideas, where there's gaps in the system where you think, man, if there was just this when you came home, maybe it would make it easier for people?
I would say the scariest thing is the fact that at this work release, if you get in trouble for anything, they put you on lockdown. And if you're on lockdown, you can't come out in the day room, but you're also not allowed to go to work. And at the Subaru plant that I work, if you miss 2 days in 100, you're done. And so the constant fear of knowing that they have that over you, and if for whatever reason you get one CO that doesn't like you, you now have a target on your back, and everything that you've built can be taken away from you by one of these people that could be spiteful or just misery loves company, those types of things. And so that would be my biggest fear right now, just because I've come so far in the short amount of time, but I know that one wrong move, they can take it all away from me.
And there's nobody there to. I'm sorry. I was just going to say, there's nobody there once that mistake is made. Once you get sent back, and it could be for not making your bed the right way, there's nobody there to advocate for you. And most of your friends and family who love you and have been supportive, after a series of mistakes, they just go, yeah, that's par for the course, Peter. We expected this,
Or I thought he had it figured out this time, but apparently he doesn't.
Right. And then obviously the second part of the question, which was, if you could wave a magic wand and this thing could be available for people as they come home, what would that be?
More support. It's one of the things that I'm in the process of incorporating a nonprofit foundation, and half of it is going to be dedicated to helping people coming home from lockup situations, whether it be rehabs, county jails, prisons, but to provide them a wardrobe of clothes, interview clothes, a ride to and from work, to where they don't have to go back around the same old people that they don't need to be around in order to get the things that they need. And more importantly, for them to feel that there's somebody or something out there that cares that they succeed. Because without that, a lot of people just, what's the point? And I believe society is waking up more and more to this, because I am seeing more and more types of foundations out there and things, and people trying to help out in that exact role for people that are coming home, because the amount of people that are on their third, fourth, fifth trip to prison is ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a broad landscape with a lot of pitfalls and a lot of problems, and I look to people like you to hopefully help rectify the system, and hopefully this show can go right along with that. I appreciate you coming on, Peter. Thanks for your time, seriously, and good luck.
I'm honored that you let me be your first guest, Lee.